Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching by Rabbi-Cantor Hilary Chorny.
We're on page 1024 in our Chumash. And on that page is a piece of our biblical canon that has been grafted directly into liturgy and used regularly as a part of Jewish ritual life for a very long time. What is that piece of liturgy? The Shema. As we're going to find out today, there is another piece in the very book of Devarim that might be very mad to find out that there's another part of the book of Devarim that's called the Shema. Because there's another, the Shema, in the book of Devarim, in the Parsha, in our Parsha to come, in Tavo. And I want us to look at the differential between the two, what's missing and what's present in each of the two places, and it's the very thing that's present in Tavo that's not present here. Don't peek ahead yet. But what's not there this time, that is there in Tavo, and what do we do with that extra saying? So here we're in the middle of just a story. The context is, dare I say, a little dry. Vizot Mitzvah begins chapter 6 on page 1023. These are going to be the instructions, the chukim and mishpatim, that God is commanding to teach to you to do in the land that we are going to go to. And it's going to be a land, ... page 1024 that you've turned to, that is going to be, just as we ended today's Torah reading, so we get back to it over and over again, a land that is Zavat Chalav Udavash, or as we say in English. Right, it's a land flowing with milk and date. It's not the honey we think of, but anyway, for another Josh, okay. And then we can do it like Zolzer wrote it. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And what immediately happens after that? In the Eastern Ashkenazi trope. Goes directly into that, or rather, I should say it the opposite way. The way that we grafted it into parts of our liturgy goes straight from verse 4 into verse 5. We keep going directly into it. Where else does this show up in ritual life? Not just in our liturgy and the day-to-day trappings of our tefillah cycle, our prayer cycle. Where else does this show up? You can just shout it out loudly. Before going to sleep, good. Where is it written? In our mezuzah, good. Where else is it written? Tefillin, good. Anywhere else? Anywhere else I'm missing? Okay. Sometimes I miss something. I don't know. That wasn't, what's that? Yeah, the brachot by proxy, good. Yeah, that wasn't Socratic. I was just thinking maybe I was missing something. Okay, good. So it shows up a lot. How many times a day do we say this verse 4? At least. Okay, great. So the rabbis say we should say it at least twice. Liturgically, in its evolution, most Ashkenazim from Eastern traditions, Eastern European traditions, wind up saying it at least 4 times. There are 2 extra times I can think of that it's fixed, one in the prayer book and one not necessarily in a prayer book. Marshall already added one, which is many, many people say what I would often refer to as the mini vidui, the bedtime Shema. We say that sleep is like 1/60th of death. As we say at the end of Adon Olam, we hand over our soul to God as we sleep. It's as if we are resting our soul in God's hand each night as we go to sleep. So we say this mini Shema, the thing that we would say as if we were saying goodbye to the whole world, because every morning when we wake up, we say, Moda ani lefanecha melechai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati. Grateful am I, God, that you gave my soul back to me. It's a little bit of a surprise. Not entirely, sometimes even more a surprise than others, depending on what our health is. And so we say Shema at bedtime every night. There's another place every morning in our liturgy. We have this nice visual on the wall, thanks to Rabbi Schatz. And the Birkot HaShachar, the blessings of the dawn, we have a recitation of Shema fixed in those blessings. We say the Shema every morning with a little recitation of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed just beneath it, just like we do in the 2 times of Shachari and Mariv. In the paragraph of Ve'ahavta, we won't go into study this too deeply right now because, again, we're really here to study the Shema that's in our coming week's Parsha, not this one. But we say that we get a merism. Anyone remember the fancy word merism? Big Jeopardy points. I think Alan's heard me teach this many times.
I learned this verse from Rabbi Clickfeld. Merism means the whole gamut, A to Z. We say
Soup to nuts, great.
high and low.
That's right. And nods from someone else who went to the Jewish Theological Seminary, who heard this word many times. So in the Ve'ahavta paragraph, page 1026, I'll point it out in the English. I'll bounce between teaching in the Hebrew and the English of this. When you lie down and when you get up. And so the rabbis say, aha! So we should say it twice a day, which is why we fix it in Mariv, the evening service, and also in Shachari, and consider those required. I want you to hold that thought for our third source on the page I'm about to give you. So we should say it at least twice a day. I want you to just think for a moment, before I hand out the source sheets, about the context of this teaching. These Elah Mitzvah, V'zot mitzvah, hachukim v'mishpatim. This is just going to be the Torah that I'm teaching you. This is what I'm commanded to teach to all the people because this is what God said I should teach you, that you should learn. It should be taught as you're going into this new land that you're going to be living in. Here's the teaching. That's the context of this Shema. 23 chapters later, we get a different Shema, and we're going to look at it together right now. Now, while I was on sabbatical for 3 months, Sefaria changed, and I didn't realize when I hit print, and it's on me that I didn't look, that the source is only printed in English, which is only a challenge to me to point out to you a lot of the Hebraic nuances of these sources. We'll have a little fun together, and then next time I'll print the Hebrew too. Go ahead and turn to Parshat Ki Tavo in your Chumash. You can turn to page 1145, where the verse begins at the bottom of the page. Here is, I don't want to offend it. I don't want to say the other Shema. It's also just the Shema in Devarim, right? Vayidaber Moshe. Who's speaking? Moshe. But let me finish the thought. Ve'hakohanim haleviim. Who are they? Priests. A subdivision of the priestly class. So they're speaking together. They're teaching together. And they spoke. El, which is a preposition, like to. Like, who are they speaking to? Did say Kol on that page. Kol Yisrael. I never trust my eyes. Kol Yisrael. Lemor. And what did they say to them? Saying, Hasket. I'm not going to translate that yet. Shema Yisrael. There's our Shema Yisrael. What does that mean? Well, how do we usually translate that? Hear, O Israel. Hayom hazeh nihyeta la'am. On this day, this would be my translation, you are transforming to a people. It's like, it's the lihiot, but it's this sort of like, kind of, you're transmogrifying. You are, it's a bit magical. You are in the process of becoming. The tense is a little murky. A flip has happened. A change has happened. You've become a people. Nihyeta la'am. And le is a little wonky there too, but we don't have time to go into that. Ladonai Elohecha. You're not just becoming a people. You're becoming a people bonded to a God. Shema Yisrael, you are becoming a people. Two things are happening. You are becoming a people, and you're becoming a people connected to a God. All of that is very interesting, but I am most interested in the shh part of this. What is this hasket business? Can anyone translate it for me? Before Ushma Yisrael, how would you translate this word? I will tell you, in source number 2, Ibn Ezra is there to tell us. He has no idea. He says you cannot translate it. How would you translate it?
Based on the context, they cannot be used, the way the Hamas translates it.
Yeah? Okay, how do they translate it?
Silence.
Okay, how would you deliver that line, Joey? How would you, if you were an actor, delivering that line?
Silence.
Silence. It's its own command, right? Sivui? Hasket. And there's even a vertical line in our text, editorial line. Hasket. Even though there's a conjunctive, ooh, and Shema Yisrael. Yeah. Okay, anyone else want to translate it? Always safe to go with the way, I trust the editors of this book. Very safe bet. Okay. Anyone else? Hasket. Okay. I am going to, you know how they tell you like in job interviews when someone asks you a question, you should answer with a story? And I always think to myself, this is why Jewish people sometimes get really good jobs, because we're very good at answering questions with stories, right? Don't just tell them an answer, tell them a story. I'm going to tell you a story, and it's source number 3 on our sheet. Are you ready? Rav Mari. This is the 16th page of the first tractate in the order that we tend to order the Babylonian Talmud in. So it's pretty early on in the Talmud. Rav Mari is the grandson of Shmuel. And he raises a contradiction in front of Rava. He says, now in the Mishnah, what we learned was that laborers, who are laborers? Workers, and I'm going to give you a little context. Workers who are out there working, let's say, a job in a work site. Okay? Let's call it a work site of some kind. Got it? Labor, like, this is perfect for you. Okay? Workers on a work site. Okay? Can't say anything about whether they're unionized or not, but they're workers on a work site. Great. I sure needed one. Okay, great. Laborers, well, we'll have that conversation later. But laborers, they're laborers. Laborers may recite the Shema. They're permitted to recite the Shema. And we're mid-conversation about what we just said before. How many times a day must we minimally say the Shema? What did we say before? Twice. Okay, so twice. So how, in what context can we get them saying the Shema? They're permitted to say the Shema in the top, when they're up in a tree or on top of a pile of stones. Pause for that for a second. What's the context here? Why would they be up in a tree and need to say the Shema? Interesting. Okay, so AJ, what I'm going to repeat, I'm going to summarize a little something. AJ is naming the context that there might be a collective service that's happening in that moment, and they're being told, this laborer who is at the top of some pile of something or a tree, they're being told the service is happening now. Mincha, mincha. It's being called for right now, or rather in this case, Mariv or Shacharit, I should be precise. It's being called for right now. Come down. Can they say it? Can they not? That's what's being discussed. Anyone else? The context. What's the context? Why might there be a sensitivity to needing to say it while someone is in a tree or on top of a pile of stones? Okay, it could be dangerous if they had too much focus on saying the Shema. What could be the danger? So what's the takeaway then? That they can recite, but they're allowed to recite it there. Okay, so they can just say it. They're allowed to just say it while they're up there. So they should just be able to say it and not think about it too much. That's what it is. So he's saying that we learned in our Mishnah, don't worry about anything except just getting the words out of your mouth. That's what they learned in the Mishnah, is what you're saying, because we're up on top of a tree, and when you're up on top of a tree, you're thinking about a lot of things. If you got to say the Shema, just get the words out. That's what we're learning. Got it. Okay, great. Good. Did I get that right? Did I echo that right? Okay, great. I also want to name, in case it's obvious to some but not obvious to all, that Mariv Weirdly, I mean, this still applies to Mari, but we don't think about it as often because, of course, there are many hours in which we're sleeping during this time. But Mariv and Shachrit are time-bound. All of our tefillot, all of our prayers have a time-bound sense to them. The rabbis fixed hours. They said, if you're going to do morning prayers, you've got to do them in the morning. And here's when those hours are. So part of this, the setup for this story is maybe it's the time to say the Shema of the evening, right? The setup for the beginning of the whole tractate is Me'ematai Kiryat Shema. What's the time when you need to do the Shema in the evening? So it sort of starts from this pretext, right, or a context that we have a time at which we need to say these things. Okay, so he says laborers are allowed to just say Shema Yisrael while they're hanging on to a swinging branch at the top of the tree, and then they're going to go back to harvesting the olives or whatever else they're doing up there. And he goes on to say, we see, as you're pointing out, we see he does not require any kind of kavanah, any kind of intent. But then Rav Mari, this grandson of Shmuel, says, he raises a contradiction to that teaching, and he says, but you can't just say Shema. You have to focus your heart, because it says Shema Yisrael. He says, first of all, back there on page 1024 in my Eitz Chaim Chumash that I read every week. I'm just kidding, but it was funny when I thought about it. Back there in the first Shema that we heard, it says Shema, listen. So in the context of the verse, it says you should actually hear yourself saying it. And secondly, I read that second Shema, the one that we're looking at right now in Ki Tavo, and it says Hasket. You got to pay attention. Pay attention. So too, here, one must pay attention. What's happening for Rav Mari? What is he learning from one place to another? How is he applying something from one place in our Tanakh to another place in our Tanakh? Anyone seeing the connection? How is he taking something from one place in our Tanakh and applying it to another place in our Tanakh? Great. So in a secondary reading of the Shema, we're taking the meaning from just accidentally thinking it's saying lishmoa, like you should hear something, and really understanding it as listen. I think what we're doing is learning that even though in the plain context of the original text that is clearly grafted, not just that one-liner of Shema, but as I pointed out, not just verse 4, but then moving on to verse 5 and 6, ve'ahavta, that whole paragraph, and then another paragraph and another that we do twice a day, in that plain context, there's nothing that says, shh, hasket. But Rav Mari says, but later when we get those same two words together, just a few paragraphs later, we get the Moshe and the Kohanim HaLeviim saying, shh, Ushma Yisrael. He says, I think we need to learn something from that. We have to get quiet first. There's serious meaning here. We have to pay attention. I want to wrap up our learning by saying one last thing about this special idea. If you take nothing else away from this learning, it should be that no one knows what hasket actually means, okay? So it's all contextual derivation. It's all rabbinic wisdom and just Jews trying to understand what Moshe and the Kohanim HaLeviim wanted us to understand before we heard these two words again in our Torah. So this is all derivative of the text that we're looking at, which means that they wanted to be playful and have some fun with it, and that's wonderful, I think. I think it's great when we like to have a little bit of fun with text. So we're going to go way back in the time machine to a very early set of stories in Midrash Tanchuma, which you may hear often pulled on by Rashi, who's our 11th through 13th century collection of French commentary. This is not from Rashi. Well, maybe Rashi pulls on this, I'm not sure, but I got this directly from Midrash Tanchuma. And he's talking about this verse, and the author, the collector of these stories, I think it's like what we call an anthology nowadays. Does that make sense? Like it's a collection of different little pithy tales on what people thought a word or a phrase or a story might mean. And on this verse, on 27:9, the Hasket Ushma Yisrael, there are a few really interesting takes. So Moshe, the Kohanim HaLeviim, they I'll go back and read us our direct verse again. They said, Vaydaber Moshe ve'kohanim haleviim el kol Yisrael lemor hasket ushma Yisrael. So Midrash Tanchuma asked the question, what is the meaning of hasket? And then the following ushma. They said you have to break down this word into two parts. Has. What is has? Like hush. Okay, it actually has a what's the word I'm looking for? A lexical connection across different languages. Shh. Has. And then katet or katit or katat, which you'll see in the next derivation too. Break it down. Be silent and then break down, as in break yourselves down. Be quiet and then break yourselves down. Alan has a thought. So Alan's bringing up this I'm just repeating for posterity and those who are online, that Notrikun is this idea from Greek discourse, ancient Greek discourse, that breaking up a word, we can find subdivisions of meaning in those various parts of the word or syllables of a word. And Pesach itself, which is a night of discourse, has different meanings in breaking down the syllabic pieces of Pe and Sach. And it's my understanding, though I'm sure Rabbi Kligfeld can give me more insight to this because he's taught Rashi for so many years, that part of that practice that Rashi loves so much to do Notrikun with comes from his love of digging into Midrash Tanchuma, because Midrash Tanchuma is full of Notrikun, of a very similar practice. And I don't know much about it, about the Near Eastern practices of doing this so often and the Greek history of that. But yes, it is beloved. People love to break it down. And I think the next one also is kind of a form of that. And then it goes on to say also, has, and then Moshe said to Israel, has, and then kitot. Has, be quiet, and then do chevruta. Be quiet and then learn. Has, and divide yourself into kitot and into classes of people. Or has, and then another interpretation, davar acher, he said to them, you should katetu, you should pound your hearts and souls to hear the words of Torah. What all of these things have in common is something really wonderful, and I'm going to leave you with this. It has the danger of what I would call pediatric Judaism, but I think it's a false pediatric part of Judaism. Ella and I were just talking a minute ago about how in early childhood classrooms, our teachers like to hold up their three fingers. What letter does this look like?
Shin.
The shin. And what do they like to do? They go, Shema. Now, it works nicely with 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds in particular, and a little older. And it has the danger. It sounds like that's something that you would do with children. But I think that we see centuries and centuries of ancient truth-seeking into this word hasket and trying to understand what leaders standing before a collective that is in the process of nihyeta am ladonai, trying to become a people, a buzzing cohort of people who are a little bit crazed, and they couldn't just say Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. They had to say Hasket. What were they trying to do? How do we know that they didn't stand up there and go shh to the whole people and get them to say Shu Shema Yisrael? It might have been very effective at the time. My encouragement to you is to think about what it is that you need. And it might be that little mnemonic of shh in the Shema Yisrael. But what do you need to do to still your self and still your soul and still your heart, such that you can take those few pieces that our rabbis beg us in the tradition and say, you can't just say it such that you fulfilled it. You actually do need to attune yourself and give kavanah and be fully at a point of attention, and not just be Shema Yisrael, but Hasket Ushma Yisrael. And see what comes to you, trying that out in a liturgical space. Thanks for the learning today.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.